This is Changeling the Podcast.
Welcome to Changeling the Podcast. Come for the glamour, stay for the vibes. I'm your host, Josh, and with this is your other host, Pooka. Say hi, Pooka.
Many blessings upon you.
What are we talking about today, Pooka?
Well, in continuation of our episode looking at the Shining Host book, not to be confused with Noble's The Shining Host, we'll be talking about live-action role-playing, affectionately known as LARPing for Changeling. And to that end, we have two special guests here. Special guests, please identify yourselves.
Hi, I'm Ash. I am the Changeling Genre Coordinator for a LARP organization called One World by Night. I've been in the position since last year, around this time, actually.
Hi, everybody. I am Will. I am also a member of One World by Night, and I am also the clan coordinator for Clan Venture within the org for as long as a year as well.
The Blue Bloods.
Yes.
Yay! I'm very excited about this. As I said before, I got into Changeling through LARPing, but I haven't done LARPing in a while now, so all this stuff's making me want to get back into it.
Excellent, yeah.
We're going to be discussing this topic from very different positions, Josh.
Yes. So I have one question that we didn't have written up. What's One World by Night?
One World by Night is a multinational LARP organization specifically for Old World of Darkness games. And basically, it's sort of like an MCU shared universe type situation where all of the games exist together. You can send your sheet to other games if you're traveling. There's large events where people travel from multiple different regions to attend.
Yeah, I think there's a vampire LARP of that network in my area, but maybe it's a different multinational LARP network. I'm not sure, but
Oh, we can talk.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a map
Yeah.
on owbn.net where you can find games near you.
yeah, I don't have as much experience. Most of mine were like one group. We can get into what LARPing is. I guess actually that's a good question. What's LARPing?
LARPing is live action role play in that you create a character, especially in our organization, you create a character with a background, an idea for story, things like that, working with your staff of the game you're based in.
Mhm.
And you play your characters, you make friends, you make enemies, allies, what have you, as you grow and gain experience. It is a general group storytelling system. It's all about, what the overall arc is, this, that, and personal growth of character, personal growth of friendships, and stuff like that.
Okay.
And to piggyback off of that, a lot of people, when I say that I do a lot of things in LARP, assume that I am out here throwing spell packets and shouting lightning bolt, lightning
Yes.
bolt.
Yep.
It's not like that at all. It's what we do is called a parlor game, where it's all in the mind's eye theater.
Yeah. So it's still called Mind's Eye Theater, the system that you're using? I was a little bit...
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, that's one thing. Yeah, there are many types of LARPs, and then if you want to get a group of LARPers from different backgrounds to argue over, say, what's a parlor LARP? Or what isn't a parlor LARP, you can also get that. But
It is the funniest. I have
Yeah.
never seen a bunch of nerds so passionate.
We are.
But so what are the key differences for Mind's Eye Theater in general versus tabletop, let's say like Changeling? Not everything, but what's like the big key differences?
That's there's two things that are very important. From tabletop, it's usually a group of 4 or 5 friends playing with a storyteller. In LARP, it is a couple storytellers dealing with anywhere from 10 to 30 people.
Yeah. Or more.
Or more.
Or if you're
right.
getting kind of nuts. Yeah.
The other side is tabletop, you use a dice system. In Mind's Eye Theater, we use rock, paper, scissors for
Okay.
challenges.
And I'd say another big difference, you're not like throwing spell packets and stuff, but you are different. You have different things happening at the same time.
Also in live action, you get to dress up and
Yes.
costume up. So
If you don't costume for your tabletops, what are you doing?
Yeah, there's nothing preventing you from doing that for a tabletop.
Right.
People don't spend nearly as much makeup budget on their tabletop games usually.
yeah.
I
Right.
beg to differ, but okay.
I will say that there's a big theatricality element in LARP that I love and is kind of what brought me to it, although I don't have a theater background. But the
Yep.
sort of improv and playing off of people and that body language really is different and has such a different, bigger energy than tabletop
Yep.
gaming.
Yeah, and it can get really blurry. Like I played in what was basically a tabletop crossover Mind's Eye Theater game at one point with
Mhm.
like 5 people. So I mean, it can get very all over the place. But
A LARPle top, yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
It's what we call very small games, yeah.
I haven't heard that term, but I like it. Yeah, and that can also be like a downtime scene, or you could have. There's all sorts of ways to do things.
Yep.
There's no.
Exactly, yeah.
So, as someone who has only done a very limited amount of LARPing and none of it in a World of Darkness, Dungeons and Dragons, any kind of fantasy tabletop setting, I have now that we've recorded the episode, read through the Shining Host book and created a character. But I'm curious, how do you go about putting together a LARP for Changeling? Like, with the tabletop game, I can call up a few friends and say, "Are you interested? Let's do this." But as you're alluding to, it seems like it would be a lot more planning and execution for a proper LARP.
So I'm very lucky, and Will and I are both very lucky. We game in the same region where we do have a very large crew, and
Mhm.
there's always an interest in new games. So if I were to call everybody up and or put a message in the local group chat like, "Hey, I'm starting a new Changeling Chronicle. Tell your friends." I know that I would get at least 10 to 12 people who have been dying to play Changeling, probably another 5 to 10 who wanted to
Yeah.
check it out, and
Mhm.
more sort of through word of mouth. Local gaming stores are very big for recruiting as well.
Yep. Yep. Also, our state in particular has a long love for Changeling back from the Cam Club days. And it basically, and when it finally was first decided to make a Changeling game in our area, people just like, hell's yes, let's go.
Yeah, my strategy was for the LARPs I started up. It was a long time ago, but it was generally I go to a vampire LARP that's full of tons of people,
Mm-hmm.
and then I find like some subset of them want to play Changeling, and then they have friends, and that's how you get a Changeling LARP.
Yeah, it's very much recruiting and sort of
Yep.
shanghaiing a little bit.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
Well, that's how I got dragged into the LARPs that I did play, so I
Yeah.
get that.
Yep.
Or you confuse somebody, and like in my case, how I got into LARPing, where I thought I was going to play a tabletop game of Alternity, because the person really did not describe what was happening well, but it was fun when I got there. I was very confused when I got there, but it was fun.
So how do you sell it to people? I mean, what you just said about the theatricality, I think, is a big piece of it. But when it comes to gamers who really are invested in like the dots on the sheet, the rolling of
Mhm.
dice, and all of those sort of system specific things,
Mm-hmm.
how do you talk up rock paper scissors to people who are coming from that background?
It depends on what they're into. If they're
Yeah.
more into PvP,
Mm.
but if it's your jam, it's your jam.
Yeah.
There's certainly an art to playing rock, paper, scissors competitively with people. There's a lot
Yep.
of eye contact and shoulder forward movement.
And different things to check for cheating than
Yeah.
rolling dice.
Yep.
The lights come down, everybody clears. The two competitors move to the center.
Yeah. Somebody's like, wait a second, you were just throwing rock and then you switched it to scissors at the last second. What are you doing?
Right, exactly.
It's also, you don't want to like metagame because some people just have a pattern.
Yeah.
Good old rock. Nothing beats rock.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens over the years. You
Yeah.
can kind of pick up patterns and stuff like that, and then you go, I can't. I need to blank my mind. I need to
Yeah.
make this clean. So
Yeah, I don't know if your experience is the same too, but when it comes to people who aren't LARPers bringing in, I've generally I think I've had more people who haven't played a role playing game before join a LARP than people who've only played tabletop.
well,
I think so.
it's the entire concept of Mind Eyes Theater. It's people hear theater and they go, oh, this is more like improv acting.
Yeah.
I've also had great success in relating it to. Do you remember? I don't know if you guys did, but I grew up in the woods, and there were a couple other kids around. But we would go out in the woods and like we'd play, and we'd make our
Yep.
little like
Oh, yeah.
witches potions out of leaves and like acorn caps and dirt
Mhm.
and sticks.
Yeah.
And that's LARPing, really.
Yeah, and that's a great way to sell Changeling in particular too, I think.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that, Ash. Growing up where I did, you know the Freehold book.
Yeah, you grew up near Dudleytown,
I
right?
grew up near
Canada
I
Mhm.
grew up near literally it was a town away.
I I also grew up in one of the locations in the Freehold book.
Yep.
That's cool.
The sad thing is you can't even go to Dudleytown anymore. It is now considered private property, even though it's in the middle of a state park.
So you can't take a dip in that lead water lake or whatever it is?
Well, here's the thing. Greymere Glen versus the actual Dudleytown story is two totally different things. It started as a tin mining town during the colonial era, and it basically petered out because they started hitting lead.
Interesting. Gonna have to do like a link in the show notes back to the episode on Freeholds and Hidden Glen so that listeners know what we're talking
and
about.
I'm sure I can find a couple videos about Dudleytown as well. So,
Nice.
Yeah. I guess one question is, if sort of related to what we're getting on, if somebody listening, most people listening to this are tabletop changeling players,
Yep.
I'd say.
Mhm.
Let's suppose there happens to be a changeling LARP in the area. I do not recommend you start your own if you've never. You could, but that's what people.
Ash keeps calling me out because I've been so busy because I've been working on a changeling LARP for training real players.
Yeah, but if you happen to find what sort of generically, obviously, what should they know to not so be afraid, I guess, or what should they know? What should they be expecting?
They should be expecting somebody as a storyteller. They should be expecting players to push as far as they can when they start with getting, certain arts and realms and things like that.
I think that depends on if you're an inexperienced or if this is your first
Yep.
time with Changeling and you've decided to ST it and you're coming in for a group of established Changeling players who know what's going on.
Yeah, I was talking players specifically joining, not a.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I said that the wrong way. Yeah.
No,
I meant,
you're fine.
No, that's fine. I misunderstood.
Yeah.
So if you're an established World of Darkness player coming to a Changeling LARP, but it's your first time with LARP and Changeling,
or just at least LARP.
or just at least LARP, I would expect things to get weird, and I really cannot emphasize enough how much you should lean in.
Yep.
Things are going to get a little bit weird. You're not going to know what's going on 100% of the time, and I think it's important to understand that that can also be in character, and that's okay. It is okay to be confused and lost and ask in character, "Excuse me, what is happening?"
Or just roll with it and ride the wave.
And the other players, in my experience, and storyteller, everybody there would be very excited to have you and want you to have a good time.
Yep.
Exactly. If they're not willing to take 30 seconds and explain things to you in and out of character, I don't think that that's a group that you should be playing with.
No. Like, there may occasionally be the one person who hasn't been
That
weeded out
guy.
yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's very much the exception, and everyone else will help you quickly if that happens.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Related to that, when you have issues about adjudication, if there is some kind of, not PvP necessarily, but just some kind of issue between players that needs to be resolved by a storyteller or one of their assistants, how does that usually unfold? Because I know there are rules around it, but in practice, what does it look like?
Usually it's done in private. If there's an issue between two players, I'm not gonna get the public involved in that. I don't need the peanut gallery coming in and telling me how to do my job. Especially as a woman, there's a lot of people who are willing to tell you how wrong you're doing everything.
And there's two things. Like, there's the one-off, oh, I thought this was the rule. No, I thought that was the rule. And everyone's being respectful, and then versus, okay, there's an actual personality conflict here.
Exactly. It's the private talk and just getting each side of the story and trying to educate and basically fix things for people so that everybody understands at the end and moves forward.
A lot of games also have player representatives.
Yes.
Which are there specifically to help these sorts of conflicts and make sure that everybody has like a very healthy gaming space where they can express themselves and feel heard and seen.
Yep.
I think one other thing that might, depending on your tabletop group, because not all tabletop games are this way, but there is a tendency that way. Like you were talking about PvP, and it's not like a binary. In a LARP, like, you can think about classic D&D party and some Changeling Chronicles tabletop kind of work that way, right? And then there's like, oh, PvP, everyone's out to get each other. But I'd say the default in a LARP somewhere in between the two, and that's one thing to keep that might be surprising for some people.
Definitely. And there's combat PvP, and then there's our characters are kind of crossing each other's paths PvP, and like in a vampire LARP, this might take on you destroying another player's like backgrounds during downtime actions or something like that, but it's not lethal PvP.
Yeah.
It's antagonistic, but it's still considered PvP even if it's not, throwing challenges.
And there's also like, that person's not my best friend or anything. My character isn't opposed to their character, but not really allies with their character. There's the thing that happens with a lot of couples I know where they decide that they want to be antagonists in character, and they'll plan out how to screw each other over in a way that's the most entertaining for everyone. Like, there's lots of stuff that happens.
I like that. Yeah, I think that coming to when there are conflicts like that, especially in a LARP setting, because you don't have the sort of downtime that you might in a tabletop.
Yeah.
Everything is sort of a little bit more immediate. So it's important to take time and step back after the game or before the game and check in with other players.
I have a question for you for your LARP experience. Because you mentioned downtime, how does time relate? Because that's a difference also with a lot of tabletop games.
Definitely, because LARP isn't like it just happens as it happens for a lot of times. So there will be either like a scheduled game will happen once a month, and you have a month of real time days in between to get your downtimes in and do things like that.
And it's both in-game and out-of-game downtime is the default,
Exactly.
I'd say. You theoretically could do it differently.
Well,
but
it's a
some
lot of
games have,
yeah,
but it's a lot of paperwork.
that's unusual. Like,
Yeah.
and that's usually like, oh, I want to play a vampire game where it's like every 100 years is a game session or something.
Right.
Yeah.
I know that there was a Dark Ages game in our area that did that very well for Vampire.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of like background work on the storytelling staff. And they said never again, basically, once it was done.
But the default is it's time matches up.
Yeah.
Right. If you're doing a scene with another player in downtime, you might just be like, all right, this happens whenever. It's considered timey-wimey. It happened. We're not going to worry about the exact date too much.
Or maybe if you needed to, you'd be like, that happened last Thursday. Whatever.
Yeah. Hey, follow up after game, blah, 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 blah. This happens during the following week. Okay, cool. As long as people are agreeable to the timeline or whatever, it means from players to staff, it's all good.
Yeah. And I think another thing to keep in mind is when you're actually at the game session and it's the game session proper and not like a downtimey thing in between, that different from some, you're in character. You're speaking in character. That's the default for playing.
Yep.
Which is also a thing that's not necessarily true in tabletop.
Yep.
Like, you don't say my character says
yes.
blah.
Yes. It, as I said, it's a lot more improv than not.
Right, and that sort of being in character headspace can definitely lead to a lot of bleed, which is something that has to be very carefully managed.
Yeah, bleed, immersion. These are all things I've heard tabletop people describe, and I'm like, I've never really even felt it in tabletop games, but I definitely haven't.
There's a lot more emotions on the sleeve.
You might want to define these.
Yeah. So bleed.
Bleed is, well, let's start with immersion, because I think immersion is sort of the lower level, and then bleed is when it becomes too much. Immersion is that moment you might be reading a book and you realize you're not even reading the pages or the words on the page anymore. You're just playing the movie in your head and you're invested, you're in it. It's very immediate, and everything, like, you're in character, you're in your groove.
Yeah. I think of it as you are in chimerical reality right now.
I like that. Yeah.
And then bleed is when your emotions are going between the two. It can go both directions.
Right.
You said it's a bad thing. I'd say it's a cautious thing,
as
opposed to necessarily bad.
It's something to be aware of and manage. Yeah. Not necessarily a bad thing. You're right.
There's a lot of ways it could go bad. It's like one way your emotions affecting your character, people would call that metagaming or call that whatever. That can happen in tabletop. But like the other direction is where it gets interesting in LARP, where it's like your characters are in love. That now feels weird out of character to talk to this person, or your character really is angry at this character. But like, you got to remember that we're all friends here, right? Like, that's the idea. Like,
right. Or sort of the darkest dungeon thing, where they're like the old D&D like tract. That is a very bad example of bleed gone way too far.
Yeah.
And that level doesn't.
That doesn't happen, really.
Not really. Like, if that's happening, there's other stuff happening with somebody there besides. But it can put strains on real relationships that you have to, and something to process and something to talk through.
Yeah.
That is actually something that happens usually in LARP. It's called afters, or
Hmm.
various regions call it various different things. But basically, after you finish your game for the night, you all go out to like a late night Denny's, or whatever fill in the blank 24-hour diners near you, a Waffle House maybe.
Yeah, it depends on when your LARP actually happens too, because that could be.
Right. And you just have a meal together. You talk about
Hmm.
the game, you talk about your real lives. You might like have somebody who opposed you in an argument in a scene, and you might be like, that was so cool. And
Hmm.
I think it's important to get to know the people behind the characters, so that
Yeah,
you don't take things out of character just because it's in character.
and it can feed back in a positive way in character too, because
Exactly.
you're now talking and you can come up with ideas and stuff. It's the point to like step. There's like the stance concept in role playing games where you're like in your character stance while you're playing is pretty heavily in LARP. But like this is an important sort of out of character thinking about your character as a character step. You're not role playing. You're talking about things, not necessarily
Right.
about the game, but that comes up a lot. What happened in game? So
Mhm. And it's important just to have the kind of emotional come down and sort of aftercare with your fellow players, I think, too.
yeah.
Are there any play styles that you would caution players against trying to adopt? I mean, outside of anything like saying this isn't a PvP game, please don't go in that direction. Is there any advice that you would give about what not to do?
I would caution players to avoid, and just in general, I would say to avoid making your characters based off any like one movie or something.
Yeah.
I always try to have like at least three different influences when I make a character.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can't just walk in and say, I'm Blade.
No.
Why
Well, you
Although
not?
could, but then it's going to be a
Yeah,
short game.
yeah.
although there was one game that was fun and no one realized for like 10 sessions in that they were playing two Invader Zim characters. But, but it
Well,
was,
2 characters at once, I think, should be fine.
yeah.
3
Well,
is
no, no,
better.
no, no. There was two characters
Oh, I
that, were,
see. I see.
that had an ongoing
Okay.
interaction, and they were both based on. But it was obscure enough, no one picked up on it, and it was like translated. But yeah,
Gotcha.
That's
I wouldn't say
great.
there's
Yeah.
play styles that don't work as much. I mean, you do have to be in character, like
Well,
speaking character.
maybe not styles, but just particular things not to do. Like, I mean, for sure, there's the no touching rule, so like that's
Yeah.
fine. But beyond that,
I can't think of anything. It's not obvious in tabletop not to do that.
I would stay in character in the main room. Avoid going out of character in the middle of scenes
Yeah.
to explain yourself.
Yeah, save
And
it for
if that
literal
needs to be done, it can
emergencies.
be done afterwards. But you should try as much as possible to stay in the moment.
I'll also be honest about if you need to actually personally need to step away
Hmm.
from a scene because
Yeah.
something's wrong for you.
Oh, yeah. Like if you are not doing well with a scene and you need to just take a step back, I think the onus is on you to clearly
Yeah.
communicate that. But also your fellow players should be checking in with you too.
This is getting me actually into the sort of area of character of things because I haven't played Changeling LARP in a very long time or run it. There are things that have changed here,
Mm.
and one of them is safety tools weren't a thing when I started, at least not in role playing games. So has that influenced LARPing?
Yes.
Yes, I actually just got back from a vampire event last weekend. There was a whole bunch of different forms that you had to sign and acknowledge for like on Google Docs prior to even showing up. One of them was like a consent form, medical stuff,
Hmm.
but they also had these badges for you to wear. And the badges had an interchangeable ribbon. So if you had the green ribbon, you opted into physical contact, like light touches. Obviously, nobody was going to
Hmm.
punch you, but somebody might like touch your arm
Yep.
or
Mm.
something. The yellow ribbon meant just ask first, and the red was like do not even ask. And I think that
Mm.
that was the first time I'd seen it handled in such a way that it was so unobtrusive. You could just quickly glance down and move on, and it just kept things going very smoothly.
So, is there anything for the more social emotional safety?
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Hmm.
Staff usually go around seeing an intense scene and go and put thumbs up, trying to just get a reaction from players.
Hmm.
And if, things go a little hinky, for somebody, they kind of pull them aside, talk to them, going, okay, let's work this out, stuff like that. There's a lot of safety checks We used to never had them before, but because of Nordic
Mhm.
LARPs and stuff like that, we have slowly gotten better into checking in on players and staff members.
And that's another thing actually different too. Was I don't know about some of these newer ones, and I've seen it. I've done Nordic LARP stuff, so I'm curious. But one thing that tabletop, there's a lot of hand signals and keywords that are used too,
Mhm.
and you should learn the dialect of them for your game that you're going to be in. But there's all sorts of like different symbols that can mean different things, and this is like ways to move it. Like you stick your hand on your head in a certain way, or you cross your arms, or you're the thumbs up, thumbs down
Yep.
there, or you're calling time and making a T symbol, or all sorts of.
Yep.
Yeah, my favorite is probably you just stick one hand out flat, and below that you put like a thumbs up or
Mhm.
thumbs down. That indicates that you're not giving a thumbs up or thumbs down in character, just so that there's
Yep.
no confusion. That is purely out of character,
Yep.
like quick thumbs up or thumbs down. I keep doing it in front of my computer, like I'm really
Yep.
proud.
My favorite was always going to goth clubs with, or going to like a club with your LARPer friends, and then you like look at somebody standing in the corner moodily with their arms crossed and pretending that they're invisible. That was fun.
Oh God,
My
memories.
obfuscate.
With hand signals like that, which
Yep.
are those the kinds of things which new players would be informed about before they started? Like, does each group have its own kind of little sheet that they hand out?
Usually it's not a
Hmm.
sheet, so much as it is just quick in character or quick out of character announcements before
Mm.
game. And if you're showing up as a new player, they will definitely explain to you.
Yeah. A lot of LARPs will have somebody kind of take someone aside whose role at this is to
Designated semi-autician.
tell
Mhm.
you what you need to know, like of those kind of things.
It's also in this day and age that sort of thing would also be mentioned in house rules of the games itself and stuff, and the
Yeah.
staff would explain it to new players as well as they first come in, just to make sure they're aware the basic jargon and stuff.
Yeah. Because just like
I'm sh-
tabletops, so many
Yep.
players don't read the rules, so you can't
Yeah.
assume that they'll have read it. But
have either of you noticed any other trends in the LARPing community since, I guess, the 90s or the early 2000s, aside from safety tools?
This is really a better question for Will. I've been doing this since 2011, but without outing him too much, he's the old man.
I
yeah, 2011 is
yeah,
right when all those came out into North America.
I've been playing in the org since 2000. The org itself started in the late 90s,
Hmm.
but like the tools were not there at all. We've also seen a lot less character versus character fighting unless it really needs to happen, things like that. There's a lot more checking in, a lot more safety nets, a lot more, hey, sorry I did this to you. Let's just sit down and talk it out, make sure I'm making sure you're
Mm.
okay, and I just want to explain why I did it.
I would say that stuff probably started getting really prevalent in about 2017 to 2018.
Yep.
I can't imagine
Mm.
why.
Yeah, yeah. Me Too really
Yeah.
outed a lot of people from LARP circles,
Yes.
which is
Sure.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's stories, most of which I would not repeat on the podcast. That were,
I certainly wouldn't
yeah,
either, but there are a lot. Unfortunately, our organization obviously isn't immune to that, but yeah.
yeah. Well, if anything, I'd say like as someone who did mostly troop style, whatever, like individual or LARP organizations,
Mhm.
kind of developed a reputation for that because there would be like this. Well, you can't kick me out of this game. I'm part of the org, right? And there'd be like a process to try to deal with them instead of like the storyteller, local storyteller being like, "You're out of here."
Actually, in our org, you can be banned from a game because
You can be
step.
banned from games and you can be banned from the
Yep.
org.
Okay, that's good.
We do have stop gaps to stop bad behavior.
Yeah, we've really tightened up our missing
Yeah,
stairs, which is something I'm very
Yes.
proud of.
yeah. That used to be. That's what I was saying. Yeah, it used to be an issue
Oh,
back in the day.
we still had those back in the day too.
Oh, okay. I know the cam didn't. That was like there was more of a formal process.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we kind of, there's an autonomy between games. Each game is its own separate island, but it's part of a greater whole. So the game's house rules can have disciplinary
Hmm.
actions written in for the game for bad behavior and stuff like that.
Hmm. Another topic of changes. How did, if at all, have you seen C20 changing Changeling LARP?
So, the changeling coordinator before me, Eric, actually did a really wonderful job because C20 came out during his reign. So because so much changed with the arts and everything, he actually, along with a couple helpers, wrote basically a guide to C20 and translated it all to LARP.
Yep.
It's a really, really wonderful document. I'm very lucky that he did it, not me.
If it's okay with you, I will gladly share it to the LARP channel.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah,
And we can drop it
absolutely.
in show notes as well when this episode is released.
We actually are able to create and share content under the Dark Pact. So it's going to be branded on the bottom
For
of every
sure.
page that it's a Dark Pact material, but
Wait, let me double check, make sure it has Dark Pack on it.
it does.
I don't know if I have the updated one. No, I do not. Oops.
Okay,
It's
I'll take
fine.
care of that. But
I'm particularly interested in something like unleashing. Like how in the world does that get handled in a session?
it's a very tense couple games of rock paper scissors.
Yep. Yeah.
It is probably the most tense rock paper scissors you've ever seen in your life. I have never seen a group of gamers just tense up and like watch intently as this player like chops it out with a storyteller.
Nice.
But it's one challenge and no retests.
I think I remember what that means. Yes. Okay.
Yep.
So you play one game of rock paper scissors, and that is it. And based on how it goes, win, lose, or tie, that is sort of the guideline for the storyteller for
Is
what
there
to do with it.
does it have the like you got too successful aspect of it?
Here we go. The system itself is to unleash a character first spends 2 points of glamour and gain a trait of nightmare. Then engage in a challenge of their glamour plus current nightmare plus art level against the banality of the area object or the banality plus willpower of a sentient subject. This may not be retested by any means. On a loss, the player does a follow-up simple challenge. On a win, the unleashing sleeping fails and she cannot use the art for the remainder of the scene. On a loss or tie, she loses control of the art entirely, getting an imbalance as well as allowing the art to run wildly and dangerously around for one turn. The next turn, she suffers banality trigger. The unleashing ends and cannot use the art or spend glamour for the remainder of the scene.
I imagine that's one of those moments when no matter what everybody else is doing in the room, everybody stops and looks.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There is usually there's like a scene-wide unleashing, or really the only ones I've seen in LARP. So everybody is watching anyway because it is very scary.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other pieces from C20 specifically that are noteworthy for how they've been incorporated?
I am actually running a plot right now because in C20, David has come back, and it's not really explained, but he's there, right? But in our organization, David has been gone for years and years and years and years.
Yeah.
And up until C20, he was still missing because nobody ever really ran that plot. So that's something that I've taken on to kind of bring canon and One World by Night together and have us in agreement.
So you're not using the 5-court thing? There was like a LARP book that had come out at one point that's like big setting changes.
Oh, is this the one on Storyteller's Vault? Because I also wanted to ask if that had been in anyone's.
Oh, we don't use Storyteller's Vault.
We do not use Storyteller's Vault.
If we had to allow something from Storyteller's Vault, we would have to allow everything from Storyteller's Vault.
Yeah. There was this whole thing, like the company that was doing like those around the 20th anniversary era, the different company that was doing the LARP things had sort of from my understanding, the story might be incorrect, but my understanding was they had gotten really close to making a new version of Changeling LARP, and it was very different. Like,
I actually know one of the writers of that book, and I looked at it. I'm like, that's MES too.
Yeah, or is it 4? They had like seasonal courts, and anyway,
yeah. We used Shining Host, and now we've translated C20.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And also with the C20 update, we went from 14 trait max to a 15 trait max in Changeling.
Are you sort of using like a revised era Mind's Eye Theater?
No, we're using Green Book or
Yeah. For those listening, we're getting to the weeds here. Changeling, just like tabletop Changeling Mind's Eye Theater LARP was kind of stuck in 2nd edition when everyone else went revised. So some of the like rules, were very different. So
That was a big problem for a long time with getting people into Changeling because the rules were a little bit bananas
Yeah.
comparatively.
yeah, I mean they're not as I have some old vampire LARP books from way before that era, and those have some really bananas stuff.
Oh, the
But
gray books.
The time before
like you had
genre.
4 health but still you still had 4 health levels
Yep.
in
Yeah.
the yeah.
Noted.
hmm So aside from C20, if and how are things different from like before the pandemic with LARPing and now?
So before the pandemic, LARPing was mostly in person. There were a
hmm
few Discord games, but it was mostly where you could run scenes with people who weren't in your area. There were a couple games, but it was mostly downtime scenes and just a lot of what we would call soft RP, which is no chops, just hanging out, kind of coffee
hmm
shop scenes.
Yep.
Obviously, that all changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
Yep.
uh,
Yeah, my cabbages. It's just most every game in One World by Night had some form of Discord presence.
Yeah.
Even if the storytellers didn't want to run Discord, they had it set up so that you could play your character if you wanted to, or they just went on hiatus.
Yeah. And I mean that bit wasn't so different. Like a lot of LARPs way back when had like message boards for the LARP
mhm.
Right,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. But it turned into like did it turn into like video sessions of LARPing?
It was actually not some of it was video, I'm sure, but far and away we just kind of all reverted to our roots of okay, it's 1997 AOL chat room,
We're
go.
mushing.
Yeah.
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 Yep.
See, that I can get
Or
behind.
the old World of Darkness
Yeah.
game board. Oh,
Yeah.
that the cringe.
I
Oh,
would say the big difference, if for people who have done a bunch of the online gaming, it's the kind like and like in person LARPing. In person LARPing would be like online gaming with a bunch of people, except you definitely have sessions where the storytellers are there, the people running it are there, and it's lasting X number of hours regularly. It's not 24/7 because
Yep.
I heard rumors of one LARP that was 24/7. I think in Ottawa, because Ottawa in the 90s,
Yeah.
this was before I moved here, had some craziness, and that's bedlam.
That
Well,
is
that
bedlam.
pandemic has actually brought out a lot of 24/7 Discord playing, and it was like,
Yeah.
I actually had to step in. I was on staff for a Garu game
hmm
around that time, and I had a bunch of players who were just 24/7 gaming and getting very bad in their mental state.
mm.
And to be like,
Yep.
I need you to take a week off. I need you to take a
hmm
walk. Please take care of
on
yourself.
my Discord server, it's hey, you can soft role play all you want, but goddamn, if you're not done by 2 o'clock in
hmm
the morning, you just need to stop your scene.
With one LARP I was running, a bunch of us, like the players and storytellers, just happened to like socially be together. We're like, let's do some downtime scenes. And then we were like role playing until 4 a.m. And we're like, I think we're going to retcon that whole thing. That sounds like a good
Yeah,
idea.
I've definitely had scenes go on too long and like I'm too tired. I'm not in character anymore. We
Well,
have to stop.
we had fun at the time, but we're like, this is not canonical for our game.
Yeah.
This does not happen.
I've definitely had that
It
stuff
was an
too.
issue of what if.
hmm
I like
Well,
it.
that was like the one time I run a game of the deep dreaming too, just to make it extra.
Yeah.
So, on the more fun side, I would say, do you have any specific tips for things like costumes or props or set dressing?
I was yelled at by other members of the house I belong to, going, I was representing it way too much, and you really saying we're House Ninja. So, can you guess which house I was?
Actually, I can't. That's like 4 of them, isn't
No,
it?
there's only
It's Scotic.
Yeah.
it's Scotic,
Yeah, that makes sense.
or as our other name for it was in the day was House Half Elf, because the
hmm
Arcadian ones didn't show up yet.
Yeah.
I think of it as House Mary Sue, but you know.
Please, did you also try to convert Skahawk martial arts into
Yes.
Mind's Eye Theater? Yeah, that did not go well.
The rules are pretty simple as long as you think of it logically for an illogical system. Or the other thing is we could have looked at Kindred of the East and just turned it into a hard and soft style and martial weapon style,
Yeah.
but that was just bad.
So you had mentioned costuming before, and this actually makes me think of another issue, which is weaponry. Now, I know that weaponry is like one of the big forbidden things, and given that it's changeling, you've kind of have something in the setting already where you can say, actually, this stick is a sword or whatever. But how do you handle things like weaponry, but also the delineation between what's real, what's chimerical, what an object is, what it's meant to represent, all of that?
Usually you might have like a costume plastic sword. I had a very nice like lightweight wooden sword.
I've also seen boffer LARP weapons.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it depends on where you're playing.
Yep.
Right.
Because there's lots of different kinds of places you can play, and it'd be appropriate for some and not.
Yes.
We played at a park once. Don't do that there. But
Yeah.
but like renting the basement of a bar, that's not too bad.
Yeah, I got my first changeling LARP that I was able to play in was in the art gallery of a really, really cool little diner. I'll have to show you pictures. It's really beautiful.
Oh, the omelet.
Yeah, the cosmic omelet. But it looks like a changeling freehold.
Oh, yeah.
But obviously because
Oh,
there was art everywhere, we had to be very, very careful.
It was like a day. Yeah, it was like a daycare, children's daycare mixed with an art space. It was great.
There's like a stage for performances.
Yep.
Yeah, murals everywhere. It's beautiful.
Love that site.
So in that sense, you're almost working with the space to create mood.
Yes.
Mhm.
And there's degrees of that.
Yeah,
too.
and also in warmer weather, we either play in somebody's backyard or at a park. There was a park nearby where the diner was, in the same town, and it was a very nice park, and there was like nice little areas we can just sit there and take over and play and be out of everybody's way.
Yeah.
And do you find that you end up kind of picking up any slack by using things like mime or?
There's definitely a bit of miming going
Yep.
on. Just by sheer virtue. I don't even think people do it consciously. It's just it feels natural in the moment to do that, like talking with your hands.
Yep.
Or going through this door that's not actually here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or let me rephrase. It's there in the chimerical world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Precisely.
I found like you might dress like the mortal seeming or the fey main, but you don't need like if you, I'm thinking of the vampire example. Like, okay, yeah, you're playing adventure. You don't actually need an Armani suit,
Right.
but maybe go to a thrift store and get a suit.
Yeah, don't
kind
put
of
like an
thing.
index card tag on your sweatpants that reads Armani Crafts 5 suit.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, it wasn't sweatpants, but I've seen that literal.
The other thing for like physical props and like that, sometimes you can't do it, but you had an item card for it, so you had stats and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
And if it's an item that's going to be traded between, like it's not like on a person all the time, you probably want to have an item card anyway, just to explain what it is.
Yep.
Mechanically.
Yeah, there are item cards and props. And sometimes, like if a character dies, a player will give the prop and the item card to another player and kind of pass it on that way, which I think is really nice.
Right on.
Do you have tricks for recording willpower, banality, glamour, nightmare?
Most of this, in the before times, we were really much bigger on printing sheets.
Yep.
Because now most of it is through, like you record your sheet on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple sites for sheet management. Shout out to Holler Games, which is great for this, and Puppet Print's another one that'll let you update it as you do it.
Yep.
And it works well on a phone for doing that?
Yep.
Okay.
Links to be provided in the show notes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I want these links. Thank you.
Yeah. Holler Games is it's a newer, it's much more maintained. Puppet Prince is pretty obsolete by now. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt. Thank you for building Puppet Prince for us. But Holler is very, very good.
Did he actually fix the arts for that for C20?
He did. Yeah.
Okay.
There's
because I talked to him about it. I'm like, you're using Shining Hose. We use C20. Let me give you the packet.
I mean, to be fair, not only that Holler Games isn't just for One World by Night.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things that you will have to pick there, but you can pick C20 or Shining Host.
So, which enchantment rules are you using?
So we actually ran a plot. My predecessor Eric ran this, where as part of some in-character happenings, the mists were actually parted for full supernaturals across One World by Night. So if you are enchanted, you remember it. You can see it. It doesn't go away. For demi-supernaturals like kinfolk or hedge mages, they do still have a forgetting.
Right. But is it like because C20 actually really made enchantment hard. compared to especially Shining Host. So like, I'm just
Yeah,
wondering which of those.
you do have to spend their your glamour equal to their banality rating. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't know if this is a good segue or not, but I'm going to turn it into one. Could each of you, if you have a single moment that, maybe not your favorite moment of all time, but just like one of the most quintessential LARP moments that you've had, good and or bad?
Oh, I got one.
Okay, go ahead.
We as the org ran the Return of the Fomorian hosts, the
Ooh.
second, or as we call the Second War of Trees. And as it started, we were fighting in our area. We were fighting the Green Court because we ran the lake in Greymere Glen as was a actually dark trod for the Green Court to come through.
That makes sense.
And it was always things up. No, make it stop, make it stop, make it stop. So we were fighting this evil Balor She, I believe it was, and their goblin and their Thelane host at this state park in the area close to Greymere Glen that had an old dilapidated tower in it where it's all empty and stuff like that. And it was actually a dark freehold. While everybody's fighting everything, my Slua, the knight, slips away and goes diving into the depths of this freehold into their dark dungeon basement cavern thing, trying to find the Hearthstone. They had a guest list going on it. And well, I have enough stupid on my sheet to say, hey, what's the rules for this? And this ST's running it. Well, this, and this. I'm like, you know what? This is what I'm going to do. I can't get through the guest list, right? Yep. Well, you know what? I'm going to use fuddle for chicanery. And they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm making it believe it's actually the new moon and hasn't been renewed yet.
Nice.
I love meta magic. I love Fave 5 so much.
Yep.
Changeling magic and changeling arts, the upper limit is your creativity, and I really love that.
Yep.
My moment is actually from later on in that plot, like sort of at the end of it, because it had gone on for a couple years. There had been, and this is actually at a Garu game, because it's an organization, our plots kind of get shared around, and our changeling PCs had a lot of Garu allies that they
Yep.
called in.
In fact, I started in that Guru game.
So one of the Garu was actually the Silverfang Arun, who had taken up the mantle of the Fomorian, or the Green Prince of the Fomorian court. And people came in from various regions to take part in this 2-night game that was the binding of the Green Prince and the binding of this PC to these realms, where he, was basically going to go away. And there were PCs, and I was on my Garu PC in that guy's pack, and we played those characters together for 6 or 7 years,
Oh, wow.
and all of them, except for like 2 PCs, ended up dying as part of this plot. And it was probably one of the most meaningful character deaths I've ever seen. There are pictures of us afterwards, after game was called, where we're just standing in this yard with our arms around each other, just sobbing our hearts out.
Oh,
And it was a really, really beautiful, big, momentous LARP moment that felt like the conclusion of a chronicle.
right
Yep.
on. And that's the kind of moment where, again, when we were talking before about things like bleed, that's the positive version of bleed, I feel like, when you achieve something like that.
Definitely, it was huge. I was telling this story the other day and I cried about it, and it's
Oh.
been 4 or 5 years down the road at this point.
Yeah. But I like that as a recommendation for the medium, or for the sub-medium, I guess, of LARPing within role-playing, because I would like to think that I've had moments that felt meaningful for my characters in tabletop games, but they weren't immersive in the same way. So, it's something to think about.
It's
Yeah.
definitely it will break your heart, but
For sure.
you should probably like having your heart broken anyway. You're playing Changeling.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like a big thing that was done with the passing of David Bowie, because we were all playing
Oh.
Changeling. It just hit everybody,
Yeah.
and the org decided no, he went back to Arcadia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So following that, there's a question from, I think, one of the people on your Discord with, what are your opinions on the darker side of the genre? And that's something
Yes.
which Changeling, I know we've discussed on the podcast before, and we've wrangled over in the Discord about whether or not Changeling is a dark game or whether it's a horror game. How do you bring that kind of stuff out in a LARP?
So it depends entirely on the tone of the individual chronicle, because I think that there are different shades of darkness, and
Hmm.
either you can run like a very Thelane heavy game and kind of lean into shadow courts and the politics of that and Unseelie and Furbolgs and Fomorians and all of that. Or you can run sort of what I feel is probably better for the more personal horror, and run like Banality, Dauntain as the enemy.
You have your mom is an autumn person show up while you're
Right.
playing the game. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
What happened to me? I mentioned that before, but it's just in Freehold.
We had a tiger puka, and saw one happened, and we didn't have game for like 2 months, and then we
Yeah.
all wake up. We are somewhere in India in a Khan's dream den.
Ooh.
Oh no, it
The-
was a Rakshasa. His hands were on backwards. It was very
yeah,
uncomfortable.
it was very uncomfortable.
Wait, did they actually like do that
Oh,
stuff?
I mean, you could if you were wearing gloves and had them on the wrong like hand, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
But no, there wasn't any actual hand on backwards.
yeah.
Hmm.
This is a public service announcement. We please ask all listeners not to do themselves bodily harm for the sake of getting into character.
No.
Yes.
Please, absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Yes.
stories about spirit gum and things like that
Oh
too.
my
that-
God.
Oh.
Yeah.
Safety first.
My mom did a bunch of costuming at like conventions and stuff. So
Yep.
some
I
stuff.
am terrified of getting spirit gum in my hair. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, cosplay environment is a thing,
Yeah.
and we have people who do cosplay and play LARP. So,
Yeah. Don't use the hot glue.
yeah,
Doesn't
Oh.
matter how emergency it is.
I'm sorry. What?
That was someone was about to go up on stage and her costume was falling apart, so she pulled out a hot glue gun and
Oh no.
I think she won an award, but that was not worth it.
But at what cost?
Yeah.
don't suffer for your art when you LARP, please.
Yeah.
We
Don't
we
suffer
want
for
you
your
whole,
changeling arts.
except for
Yeah.
your changeling arts.
Yeah.
God,
Don't do the bunk. The bunk should be safe. So I think I'm wondering if there's like conventions in LARP that are don't like in Changeling LARP. Like in tabletop, when you think Susei, do you think Slua?
Yeah. But
Oh, okay.
but I've
That's
also
trash.
played a Slua with Susei, so that might be.
Yeah.
my Slua also had Susei, but I'm also
Yeah.
Skathic, which also favors Susei. There's
But
also
every Changeling LARP I've been in, if you see a Slua, they probably took Soothsay, and they're probably doing
Yeah.
Soothsay in the
Yeah.
session.
my
Yeah,
three
that
my
makes
three
sense.
starting arts were Primal, Susei, and Oniromancy.
Okay.
I mean, I did a Slua with Soothsay, Oniromancy, and Pyretics, so that was a fun combination. I think the other question, Ash, that you had shared, do you have any recommendations for newer players to Changeling LARP? I think that's basically what we've been doing for the whole episode.
Yeah,
Yep.
definitely.
So,
Yeah.
I've been hitting you guys with the soft
I
stuff.
do want to throw in one thing. It's like we've mentioned a bunch of like really elaborate things people have done. Don't feel like you have to do that. This is things people have of their own volition chose to like
Yep.
put in for this, and it's fun. But there's not like, oh, you didn't do that. Like you're not gonna.
it's kind of like the Critical Role thing. Like, no,
Yeah.
you don't have to be Critical Role.
Yes.
Yeah, and the fun thing is, and in the same LARP, you have 30 people. There's going to be different levels of financial
Sure.
and
Yep.
time commitments and all sorts of stuff.
For bunk items, dollar store is your friend.
Oh, for sure.
Yep.
I actually love going to the dollar store in character and getting bunks. I think that has been probably there was one near where I was playing, and it was probably one of like the best $5 I've ever spent. Just going through and like in character on a mission. I need things to accomplish X, Y, and Z for this bunk.
Mhm.
It was really fun.
What
to
was the
see.
bunk?
Oh my god! Of course you're gonna ask me that. It fell completely
Oh,
out of
sorry.
my head.
It's okay. We can cut that question.
I had to like get an army from one place to another, so I needed stuff for Portal Passage, and a big flicker flash bunk, and I had like $10 at the dollar store.
I do like that, though, as almost like a way of measuring bunk effectiveness is like, Again, as you said, not everybody has the same financial means, so you shouldn't say the more stuff you buy for your bunk, the more powerful it is. But just like the more inventive your choice of prop is,
Yeah.
then
Yep. Like I carried around one of those Think Geek bag of holdings. It would just had a bunch of random things, ribbons, things like that in there just for any bunk possible. I still have half the stuff we use bunks for.
I keep like a like a sewing kit, or like the tins of biscuits that you always put sewing supplies in. I keep one of those just for like random items that I found that would be good bunk material, so I can just grab it and put it in my LARP bag.
So Ellerus on our Discord chat asked 2 questions. The first of which I think we've kind of answered, which is how intense of an investment is it on average? Is it sort of like improvisational theater? Which, yes, seems to be the answer.
Sort of like. There's definitely different. I've actually had. We talked to like people coming in with a tabletop mentality, not right. There's a bit of a improv mentality which doesn't always quite fit because they're just trying to yes and everything, and you're like, we do have rules here in a system.
Right,
But,
yes, anding within the sandbox.
Yep.
and that's the thing. Some improv people have a little bit mental shift.
I've heard stories. I should probably leave it at that.
Not inappropriate things that would be inappropriate for improv, but just
Again, I've heard stories that I should probably leave to one side.
Yeah.
But then the other question, Ellerus asks, how do you, or how is it anticipated, a LARP player will sell a character concept? So I think that's a good question to think about from the LARP perspective as opposed to the tabletop one. If someone comes to you who's a new player, whatever level of experience they have, what's the expectation for how they're going to introduce themselves both out of character and then into the story?
So I think a lot of that for a newer player, even if they are an established LARPer, is on the ST staff. Because you as a storyteller are going to know the best. They might not have the character connections, they might not have the out of character connections either, but you're going to know where to put them, and you're going to be able to sort of insinuate them into the group and be like, this is the Duke's noble cousin, Lady such and such. Yeah.
I think Elris is worried about role playing it, like
Right.
trying to portray the character. And I think people are very giving. Like, if they can get a sense of what you're going for, they'll roll with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And everybody was new once upon a time. Nobody just was born the perfect LARPer. Perfect LARPers are made, not born.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure there are many
So-
people who think they were born the perfect LARPer.
Lord have mercy.
No, the best LARPers I've known are very insecure. So that's.
I didn't say the ones who think they're best are the best.
Yeah, no, we're all just basket cases
Uh-huh.
with social anxiety. But I think people are kind enough and good enough to realize that it's a new player and they might need a little more hand holding, or they might need a little bit of reassurance. And I have always seen new players come to LARP and give so much of themselves, and we give role play nods after the fact, and there are always so many people who are just like, that was so great, you did so well, like I can't believe this is your first time, and just really gassing them up.
Yep.
And I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like some new players are just, they do just go nuts and they're great. I'm not saying they have all the skills, but they'll like,
The commitment to the bit.
Yep.
yeah, and they'll just ham it up and but I find like, yeah, more someone who's nervous about that. Hopefully the storyteller staff, if you know someone and you're going to the LARP, if you can make your character sort of have a reason to hang out with them that first session, sort of have somebody with you, at least at first. It doesn't have to be the whole session, but just somebody somebody your character knows too, or something to like excuse to be around this other person for a bit. And it could be somebody you didn't know necessarily, like the storytellers help you, like ask somebody, or I find that helps a lot.
Right. In changeling context, it might be a grump who takes care of like the younger childlings. If you're a fresh chrysalis, which if you've never played
fosterage kind of thing.
Right. If you've never played changeling at all before, I always recommend coming in as a fresh chrysalis because you won't know what's going on, and that's fine.
Yep.
Right on.
But even if you are like very knowledgeable at changeling, but LARPing scarify you, you can still you are somehow associated with this other character, and
yeah, definitely coming in either with a buddy or having a buddy assigned to you. And I think that when staff assigns a player to you, they're not like picking somebody at random. You know, like they know their player base. They're gonna stick you with a good one.
someone who likes doing that role too.
Yeah,
a mentor.
exactly.
The boggin.
Yeah, they might not be playing a boggin.
Yeah, but
They
they're
might be playing a
boggins
red
in
cap,
real life.
but they are a boggin. Yes.
I was actually just thinking of a dear friend of mine who is probably she's a fairy in real life. Like she's a dance teacher. She
Mhm.
is in almost every way like an actual she with boggin tendencies, but she played a red cap grump who took care of kids, and it was the funniest.
Yeah.
She was actually a child welfare service
Yeah,
advocate.
that was like her autumn seeming.
Yep.
The
Mhm.
characters autumn seeming. She was a child welfare services advocate.
That's my motley mate.
Yeah, her name was Danny.
Danny.
We love you,
Yep.
Rachel. Come back.
Yep.
Nice. I think that's all the questions.
Yeah. And is there anything else you would want to shout out? It's okay if the answer is no, but places to follow you, that kind of thing.
I don't really have a big LARP social media presence,
Yep.
but I will pop a link to the Changeling out of character server for One World by Night. And if
Mhm.
people are interested in finding games near them, or if they want to try Discord games, they're welcome to come.
Mhm.
Yep. Which means that I have to actually work on my training wheels game.
Yeah, that means that you have to get that game off the ground. Yes.
Yes, because I have a Anarch game that actually has a couple counties that are right next to where the High Throne is in our org, and I'm like, oh, I can just do a Western Marches game and just have people rediscover lost lands. So
Okay.
Thank you so much for having us. This was
Oh,
so
thank you
much
for
fun.
coming on.
Yeah,
This is
indeed,
fun.
thank you
Okay.
guys.
I feel informed.
But
Excellent.
do you
Dun,
feel
dun,
ready
dun.
to play?
But the LARPing that I've done is I did a few Nordic LARPs with a friend who is a performance
Mhm.
studies graduate student. And I did enjoy it, but it was extremely intense. So
Yeah.
I imagine that if I were to do Changeling, it would actually be a little bit more relaxing because it is a little bit less.
Yeah.
So
And having that on, I mean, I guess you could do a Nordic style changeling LARP,
That
but
would be a lot. I don't think
Yeah.
I could do that.
Yeah, that would. Oh,
let's have a 6-hour conversation about how your mind is slowly slipping away.
okay. It's the shattering and the gates have just closed.
Right.
Let's play that for
Let's just sit with that for a second.
yep.
but yeah, I think having that experience might, if you do go join it, combined with your changeling knowledge, Pooka, I think you're
Well, I'll take a
Goodbye.
look at this link that Ash has provided.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So as to other links, you can find our website, changelingthepodcast.com. You can email us, podcast@changelingthepodcast.com. You can send us a toot, changelingpod@dice.camp. You can go to our Facebook page, Changeling the Podcast, and join our Discord, where Ash and Will are also there, along with me and Pooka. Discord.me/CTP.
And if you have any questions about OWBN and Changeling in particular, you can always email me at changeling@owbn.net.
Again, links will be provided.
Yeah. And once again, I'm Josh.
And I continue to remain Pooka.
Just remember, if you feel nervous, just go talk to the grumpy old redcap. You'll be fine.
Sage advice.
Of all the ideas bandied about in this episode, few seemed as charming to us as having a freehold inside a diner/gallery/community space called the Cosmic Omelette. Since the dreaming is infinite and holds all possibilities, such a haven for the Fae would undoubtedly feature a menu with egg dishes of celestial proportions. Imagine, if you will, a quiche made with entire nebulae and flecked with neutron stars, or a Benedict topped by a pair of poached white dwarfs and drizzled in hollandaise forged in the fiery heart of a supernova. And of course, you can order a solar omelet made with the chromospheres only, but it will cost you an extra $1.50. The customers of such an establishment would, we feel, undoubtedly include our own patrons for this podcast whom we'd like to shout out: Derek, Dorcadus, Jason Vines, Oreo, Roz Caboose, Sandchicker, Sija, and Terry Robinson. If you'd like to become a patron of our show, visit www.patreon.com/changelingthepodcast. We can't promise you a quantum singularity inside an egg cup, but at the very least, you'll get a call out at the end of each episode. You can also hang out on our Discord to join the conversation about this and other Fae topics, leave a review on the platform where you're listening to this episode, or just tell your friends and random strangers about our show. Spreading the word helps us continue to bring you content each week. Thanks very much for listening, and until next time, keep on dreaming. Here come the outtakes.
Well, to that note, I think this is maybe a good time to bring in one of the What was that?
My dog has this squeaky toy. I'm so sorry. I'm taking it away.
I'm like, is that Rio?
Yeah.
It's like, oh shit,
She's
the
got
duck
this
found us.
big toy.
Don't
left
laugh at the duck.
I was
Yeah.
clutching my pearls in terror. Lost my train of thought. So
I'm so sorry.
Derailed by Rio.
yes.